for me, it was a sort of like a challenge I needed to put myself up to, to go down that sort of Prince, Lenny Kravitz, Andrew Eldridge, sort of, crazy, wild dictator, singular vision, racehorse with the blinders on sort of thing.
Hello and welcome to the Ghost Cult Magazine podcast. I'm Duncan Evans and we have a very special guest today. That is Ville Valo, formerly of Him, and now back with a new solo project, VV, and a new album, Neon Noir. How's it going today?
Oh, greetings from not so sunny Barcelona. It's going on ridiculously well, to be honest with you. We've, I think tonight is the 10th show on this particular tour, which is heading towards Albion.
Yes,
in a sense as well, and it's going really well. The band are great, and the audiences have been wild, and it's good to be back. A lot of familiar faces in the audiences as well. It's nostalgic, sort of, it's sentimental and rocking at the same time. So definitely, I can't complain at all.
Amazing, fantastic. Well, we'll certainly talk a little bit more about the tour in a minute, but firstly, I wanted to go back to the inception of Neon Noir. So I believe it started a few years ago, maybe during the lockdown period with COVID. So what inspired you to start the solo project? What inspired you to start creating this album? Where did it all come about from?
Well, I wasn't sure after we split up with him. The last gig was on New Year's Eve 2017, and I wasn't sure what to expect. Sort of psychologically, I thought that I might have felt like as I would have lost a limb or something, that there would be this gray emptiness within, because him is and was such a big deal and big part of my life. We started the band when we were around maybe 14 years old or whatever. So it's a big deal and a large chapter. So I wasn't sure what to expect, whether the inspiration would go with him or follow me, or if I could find some new inspiration or whatever. So it took me a while to get my poop together, so to speak, and it was around 2019 that I started writing on new music. I felt that it would have felt, I'm very monogamous when it comes to bands and projects. So it would have felt wrong to start another project while we were sort of like burying him. So I wanted to give it some time, both for the listeners and for myself, a well-deserved break. And that's then it's sort of like, I don't know what else to do. I picked up a guitar and started strumming and humming and writing these oddly romantic, gothic hymns. And they ended up being Neon Noir. And the odd thing about it was that since it happened during the lockdown, most of it, that I wasn't able to sort of put a band together for the album. So I ended up producing, engineering, writing, and performing the whole album by myself. So there's only Tim Palmer, a well-known producer and mixing engineer, who mixed it, and then a fellow called Justin Sturz who mastered it. And they were the only people I was sort of brainstorming with on an artistic level. Because also the album came out on my own label. It's Heartagram Records, yep. And distributed by Spine Farm in the UK. And so it was, for me, it was a sort of like a challenge I needed to put myself up to, to go down that sort of Prince, Lenny Kravitz, Andrew Eldridge, sort of, crazy, wild dictator, singular vision, racehorse with the blinders on sort of thing. And I think it was a great experiment, a great Finnish experiment, so to speak. And it was a necessary step to take, as it would have been incredibly boring to do everything exactly as I've done for the past, 25 years before.
Totally. All right, well, so the name Neon Noir kind of embodies this juxtaposition of darkness and light, and I guess that's something that you've carried with you for probably all of your career. So I wondered if you could maybe talk about that and some of the themes and maybe messages or feelings that are present on this record.
Man, you want me to talk about my feelings? Well, I guess it's about like zebra and stripes. I've always liked the juxtaposition and the sort of yin and yang, and on this one, I honestly felt that, since I've always been a fan of both Black Sabbath and Depeche Mode, it would be weird for me to go down either route. And I wanted to sort of find a the G spot or the V spot right in between those acts and have the sort of like sentimental pop pompousness of Depeche Mode coming together with a bit more guttural sort of fuzzy guitars and the goods from Birmingham. So that's that's musically what I was working on, and lyrically, I guess the pandemic had an effect because the collective dark cloud on top of all of our heads was it was quite a testing time, a test of patience and test of will, and once again I realized that what keeps me afloat is music. That's the thing that gets me up in the morning and up from the bed. I didn't mean get up in that sense, if you were wondering, but yeah, I think the pandemic it was a good experience for me, since it did make me think about why am I doing this, and what are the reasons. Well, does any of this make any sense? Those big sort of Monty Python-esque
Sure.
question regarding the meaning of life, and that's how Noir was born. Lyrically, the juxtaposition you did mention, I think what I was trying to sort of like, the theme that was new to me was the fact that maybe due to the pandemic, at least partly, was that I realized that, we are indeed broken. Everybody's broken in their own particularly weird and wonderful ways. And I think that should be celebrated. Mm-hmm. And as opposed to sort of like all that stuff swept underneath the carpet. These days it seems a lot of people are wearing their sort of like breaking points as medals, as matters of pride, but I wouldn't go as far as that, but I'd go as far as just say that we have I'm sure that whatever you're feeling, there will be another person on the planet who's feeling exactly the same, and that can be quite comforting at times of need. So maybe that's the sort of like the vibe I was looking for with all that.
Yeah, and I've noticed there's a lot of comments on like the YouTube songs from the album where people are saying exactly that they've kind of been waiting for this moment where they can hear your voice again, and they've really felt that deep emotion and been genuinely comforted by the new record. So I guess that's totally worked there. But that kind of leads me on to another question I had, which is about this idea of suffering. Like, you've mentioned that some of the themes might have come out of suffering, the suffering associated with the pandemic. And obviously you do write about a lot of dark themes, and a lot of people maybe have this idea that artists, especially ones that do cover dark themes, have to suffer to be able to get to that place where they're creating something beautiful out of it. So I wonder, do you think that that's true? Do you have to suffer for your art, or can you get to a place where you can still talk about the dark stuff but not have to go through all that,
I don't think you have to, but you get to.
Yeah.
Because it's a free bonus with
Sure.
it all, and I think it's very important, at least for me, to feel that I've given it my all, each and every song and each and every lyric, and it needs to really feel. There needs to be that twist of a knife. I think that is essential. It's not about self-torture as much. It's just about trying to take the extra step with each and every song, and have each and every song the focal point of your life at that moment when you're working on that song. I think that it gives my life extra meaning, and it gives the song extra meaning, and it makes those two things intertwine in a sort of magical way. So no, you don't have to suffer, of course, but I decide to. I think
Right.
it's part and parcel of the whole thing. It's like I was talking to somebody who does a lot of marathon running, like really like triathlon and all that stuff, and we were talking about when you get into the zone and it does hurt, and but that you can do it. That there's still 20 miles to go or whatever, but you can do it. And that's the sort of like the strength of will, the sort of like not giving up, and kind of, it does hurt, but it's the good kind of hurt, and
Yeah.
it's there for a reason, I think. So in that sense, I think that it is an important part of the whole process.
Yeah, great answer there. Yeah. All right. So I wondered a bit more about this process that you've talked about, where you were completely creating these songs on your own. And I believe you performed everything on the album, like instruments wise, and sort of arranged and produced it yourself. So, how was that? Like, so you mentioned sitting with the acoustic guitar. So you were kind of strumming chord patterns and coming up with vocal lines. And then, like, what did you start to throw stuff into, a digital audio workstation and just build up layers upon layers? And that's how it was. Or how did that process work? And how did that feel different from maybe previously where you're bringing ideas to a band?
It is like, I think it was Alan Moore who said that, magic is creating something out of nothing. And indeed, music is something like that. You start with no ideas whatsoever, and you pick up an instrument, you're listening for resonances that, for whatever reason, tickle your senses in a way that they haven't, that you haven't experienced before. And it starts from as a simple thing as that, just, finding sounds that make sense to you, and then following those sounds and hoping that they will lead you to interesting, throughout their labyrinthine ways, this weird maze of creation or whatever you want to call it. And by layman's terms, it's exactly like that. So you get your Pro Tools going and you press record. So it's like building a puzzle, but there's much more to it. It's not as if you would have a notebook saying play drums at 5 o'clock in the morning and play bass at whatever. Especially on Neo Noir, I went for a very non-linear approach, as I had everything set up in a circular fashion, so I was able to go back to drums or bass guitars or whatever at whatever given point. If all of a sudden I came up with a new idea and wanted to mess about with it, I could. And that's something I've never done before, because not only did I arrange and sort of produce the stuff on the go, I was also writing on the go. And that made it such a sort of hypnotic and meditative and, dare I say, psychedelic at times, because I really got lost in the world of making music. And usually with a band, you're not able to do that because there's so much noise. There's the hangouts and who's going to pick up the coffee and all the jokes, about and that hassle, which is lovely. Mm-hmm. But I just experienced that for about a quarter of a century. So this solitary experience was very much needed, and it really gave me a new appreciation towards creating stuff. Now maybe I know a bit more how a writer would feel, mm-hmm. or a painter. Because how can you describe a painting before it's done? You can brainstorm at the pub to your mate, yeah, I'm doing this great piece. The canvas is this and that big, but people will be like, right on, good to hear that you're doing your thing, and we hope to see you one day. But it was very similar with Neo Noir. It's like I needed to come up with the goods to be able to actually, present that stuff. It's and that's the reason also that in 2020 I released a first EP called Gothica Panica with 3 tracks that are on Neo Noir as well, because I didn't want to go down that sort of car salesman route, going to record labels and claiming that I have the best rock and roll album that they've never heard. And because I didn't have anything. So I thought that the proof's in the pudding, and I get a few songs going and see how the labels will react to them. But not only that, but how the people are reacting. If it makes sense. There had been a few years gone by and I wasn't absolutely sure, what's happened in the realm of rock and roll or metal or all that, yada, yada. So I was an outsider, and I like to be an outsider and keep it that way. So I only thought it fair for everybody involved that there would be a little bit of a taster, and then we could start like negotiating the dineros and so forth.
Yeah, sure. So, do you feel that this is maybe your most personal expression then? Because, I know you wrote most of the stuff for him, but obviously sort of not maybe having to filter those ideas through other people's expectations and with other people's arrangements and things. Would you say this is your most personal expression as an album?
I'd like to... the way I'd put it is probably that I've never felt as intimate with music as I have with Neo Noir. So in that sense, music has always been very personal. I take it very personally, too much so, a lot of people say, but and it needs to come from the heart. It needs to be that sort of, valiant this sort of these romantic notions of knighthood and so forth in the realm of raging rock guitars. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Because of the lack of noise around and the fact that it was only me, it's very undiluted. It's very pure, and whether it's better or worse because of that, I don't really care. The fact is also that I love the fact that somebody doesn't like it. I'm the one to blame. I don't mind. There's no big machinery around it. I'm not with the machinery. I'm not talking about a band, but I'm talking about record labels and A&Rs and producers and mixing engineers and all that stuff. Where you don't lose your identity. Definitely, if you have a good group around you, they enhance, they embellish what you are and make it really shine. But I think it was an important step to make this time around, to do the Neil Young sort of big middle finger to the man and go for it by yourself, you know. Totally. David and Goliath.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, obviously on the record, there's a lot of rock and metal, maybe gothic rock influences. And, you know, I can definitely hear Depeche Mode, who I know you've mentioned a lot. But I know you've also mentioned a few other artists there, like you said Prince and you said some others. So I just, because there's such a kind of pop aesthetic as well. There's a pop sensibility to the melodies, you know, and there's an immediacy to the melodies and the choruses and your approach to layering the harmonies and all that, that I wonder whether you have any kind of influences that people wouldn't expect that are completely outside the realm of rock or something like that at all.
Well, I've always been quite honest about my perversions regarding music. I love the British group, the Wild Beasts.
Right.
That they made such a great, weird sounding. You know, I like. At its best, the band or an artist creates his or her or their world. You know, it's like J.R.R. Tolkien. You know, it's a world unto itself with its own rhyme and reason and, you know, laws of physics and whatnot. And it doesn't matter what genre. But if a band can create that for me, then I'm hooked. I love Interpol and I do love Joy Division as well when we talk about Interpol. And I love the Chameleons, and I really went down and listened to a lot of the 80s stuff more because I was too young at that time to listen to that stuff. I was listening to, like, you know, in the mid 80s, I was listening to Kiss and probably Michael Jackson, as everybody was, because we were forced to. Yeah. So I got into that, so like that aesthetic, maybe a tad more that I haven't had the opportunity of doing before. But then regarding those artists with their own vibes and their own worlds and whatnot, you know, like Death Heaven, for example, with their Infinite Granite, the album that came out, I think just pre-pandemic or during pandemic, I thought that's a wonderful album. It's not unlike Anathema back in the day, who all of a sudden, you know, turned from the more sort of like melodic death metal thing they did with their debut album. They turned into this weird concoction that you weren't really sure whether they want to be Pink Floyd or whether they want to be something completely different. And I think when an artist sends the listener mixed messages, when you feel like you're on thin ice, I think that's the best. And so those artists are the ones I really, really enjoy. There's I'm just thinking about what I've been listening to. Zetra from London.
Right.
I dig their stuff. There's a duo from Brooklyn called Light Asylum. They haven't released stuff in ages, but it's cool. This goth disco weird electro. I don't know what to call it, but and then the band Kyle and Mikla, with whom we're touring now. This Icelandic trio of little witches. They're beautiful. They're absolutely wonderful, and they're a great example of I love people who, you know, stick to their guns. They do their own thing and come hell or high water. And I think that's a special talent. That's the magic of music. And I hope, you know, whomever does that, whatever it might be, you know, they got my blessing. They don't need it, but anyway.
Totally. All right, so let's talk about the tour. So you've been touring for a little while. I think you're in Spain at the moment. There's a lot more to go. So how has that all been going? How has it been received? And how has it been, like, translating these songs, which was so personal and so intimate, as you've said, to an actual live band performing them and kind of letting go of them in a sense?
Yeah, it is like musical flashing. That can be quite daunting, but usually you don't get fined for doing so. Usually,
Yeah.
but it was really nerve-wracking playing the first gigs. The album came out on January 13th. We played a trio of shows in Helsinki on that weekend, and I didn't know what to expect. I hadn't been on stage sung in English in what 6 years, 6.5 years, or something like that. It was a wild moment for me personally. But we've rehearsed a ton with the band, and we've had a blast doing so, as well as with the technical crew and getting the lights and everything together. So we were very well prepared, and it went. Yeah, it was fabulous on all possible levels. Even my mum loved it. They came to see my mum and dad. They came to the gig on Friday, the first one, and they dug it so much that they came back on Sunday, which is a rarity. So usually she'd rather tend to her gardening. So,
Right.
so yeah, it was amazing. And once again, a lot of familiar faces in the audiences throughout all the gigs on the tour. And it's miraculous, the loyalty of people when it comes to the realm of hard rocking music. I'm a fan of Iron Maiden, and I'm a fan of a lot of bands, and still carry the T-shirts and with pride. And it's glad that me and him have been able to sort of like infiltrate that world, at least to a degree.
Yeah.
So it's quite amazing, and yeah, I feel I'm in a good place. It's great performing. Also, we're playing a lot of hymn tracks, so we're doing like a half and half, and the set is so that it zigzags between the new and the old, which is on various levels. I find it interesting, musically and feel wise, and the audience have been really digging it because a whiff of something new, and then right back to the nostalgia and travel, like the time traveling between the late 90s up to today. So it's working really well, and knock on wood, it'll continue doing so again tonight in Barcelona.
Totally. And so has it been quite easy and natural then to translate these songs into being played with the live band? Has there been any difficulties there? Any times when you've had to kind of say, whoa, no, this is, I'm precious about this song. It really needs to be this and not that. Or have you kind of let people have a bit more free reign with how they interpret the songs? Or how's that been?
I'm proud to be a musical dictator. I think it's, but I'm an exception since I'm a benevolent dictator. I think the guys in the band, the guitar players, the bass player, and the drummer, they all knew what we were shooting for, what the idea was. We're trying to bring the old songs up to date, but not to lose their identity. So at the end of the day, the old songs, I think, sound maybe more closer to the original album versions than they did with him. Because when we were with him, we were hoping for a bit more rough around the edges, sort of like Black Sabbath live. Mm-hmm. That it's losing things and it's gaining things by being more raucous and rowdy and noisy. But with this thing, I wanted it to be a bit more pompous, a bit more collective, a bit more, not necessarily hi-fi, but sort of, a bit more pompous is probably the right word, a bit more epic. Yeah. And so those were the themes, and the guys in the band understood, and as well as the crew, who are really, really important with all this. So they understand what we were working for, and it's been nothing but an absolute pleasure. We haven't been in a position where we have to struggle or do any compromising. As with music, usually you just have to fight your way through it. Obstacles are there for a reason, and usually, challenges are good, and that's what life is all about, as well as music. So it's all good for the time being.
Fantastic. So could you tell us where you're headed next then, for a bit of an overview of where the tour's coming for those people that might want to come and see you and haven't got their ticket yet?
Well, fortunately enough for me, unfortunately enough for some, a lot of gigs have been sold out. I think all the gigs in the UK have been sold out already, which is quite amazing. And now we're playing Spain. We're heading over to Portugal. We're playing Hungary. We're playing France, Germany, and then we're hopping over to the Isles of the Brits, and we're playing Bristol, Manchester, Nottingham, Glasgow, and London. After which we go back home, do a bit of laundry, and fly over to North America.
Nice.
So we're coming back for download.
Great.
So that's going to be amazing. It's always been an absolute pleasure. And then it's great. Yeah, it's great to come with this sort of set with the new band and with the new sort of like spirit. So yeah, it's going to be a lot of work. We're hoping to tour until the very end of the year, or even a bit further. Let's see where it takes us, because I'd love to go back to Australia. I'd love to go back to Japan, if at all possible, if there's people enough to interested in this sort of racket. So it remains to be seen, but we're working on it, and throughout this process, we're following what resonates with the people, what works and what doesn't, and that will definitely be a guideline regarding any future recordings.
Fantastic. Well, actually, that just leads me on to what is going to be my last question, because we're just about running out of time. So, future recordings, do you have any plan? Are you going to do more albums as VV?
Well, I guess I have to be a realist, and then see how well this one goes. I've been pleasantly surprised that people haven't been sort of like leaving the hall, going to the pub and getting a pint of beer when I'm playing the new tracks, and coming back for the hymn tracks. So there is still hope for me. So it's yeah, it's not all gloom and doom.
Totally. That's a good way to sum up the whole thing. It's not all gloom and doom. All right. Well, Ville Valo, it's been a joy to speak to you. Thanks so much. So yeah, have a great rest of the tour and all the best.
Thanks for having me. Hope to see you on the tour in the UK. So please do don't be a stranger. Come on and over and knock on the dressing room door, and we shall let you in, and and utilize our mini bars.